Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 26th of April 2019, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. Your host today, Mike Robinson, myself, Brian Gerrish, and we're delighted to be joined by David Ellis from Strategic Defence Initiatives.
Well, we're going to start off with a bit of intelligence stuff, Brian, because, Donald Trump tweeted this out on Wednesday afternoon. Former CIA analyst Larry Johnson accuses United Kingdom intelligence of helping Obama administration spy on the 2016 Trump presidential campaign. Wow, it is now just a question of time before the truth comes out, and when it does, it will be a beauty. This was pretty much straight after the announcement that Trump was coming over for a state visit, and he was referring to an interview given on Tuesday to one American news network on, they were describing how British intelligence allegedly helped the Obama administration, quotes, dodge the Fourth Amendment by spying on the Trump campaign. There was quite a bit in the press about this, so here's the Independent's take on it. Trump promotes conspiracy theory that UK helped Obama administration spy on his presidential campaign. What have we got next? This is MSNBC. Following state visit news, Trump falsely accuses UK of spying scheme. Newsweek had this utterly ridiculous Donald Trump tweet claiming UK intelligence helped Obama spy on campaign should be ignored, GCHQ says. Well, let's just have a quick look at what GCHQ did actually say. They said the allegations that GCHQ was asked to conduct wiretapping against the then president-elect are nonsense. They are utterly ridiculous and should be ignored. But Brian, that's not a denial.
It's a sort of sidestep, Mike, I think.
Right, because they're saying that they're denying that GCHQ was asked to conduct wiretapping. They're not denying that GCHQ did conduct wiretapping. So my question is, what did they do? And I don't think we're going to get any particular answers from them.
Well, no, this is an organisation which polices itself to its entire satisfaction because, of course, it's so secret that we can't talk about anything we do. And if we do anything wrong, we're not going to talk about that either. So it's just a donut where the information keeps on going round.
Absolutely.
Presumably, they're not being trained by Common Purpose anymore. But remember, it was only a few years ago that the political charity Common Purpose had access to GCHQ. The public can't get access to GCHQ, but a charity, Common Purpose, was able to get in and train staff. Just remarkable.
Let's stick with GCHQ because, as we mentioned on Wednesday and Thursday of this week, this event was being held in Glasgow. This is Cyber UK 2019, the UK government's flagship cybersecurity event, which was held at the NEC. And speaking at that event was none other than Jeremy Fleming, the director of GCHQ, and he basically began his, after offering condolences over the Sri Lanka bombing and so on, he said that the National Cybersecurity Centre is only a few years old, but cybersecurity runs through GCHQ's veins. For much of that time, of the 100 years of GCHQ, it's been the less celebrated part of our mission, but that's changed in the last few years. As we enter the third decade of the internet age, this technology revolution is providing extraordinary opportunity, innovation and progress, but it's also exposing us to increasing complexity, uncertainty and risk. So it's inevitable that this digital era also brings with it new and unprecedented challenges for policymakers as we seek to protect our citizens, judicial systems, businesses and even societal norms. And this, he said, requires the evolution of policies and practices. And he highlighted the online harms white paper published earlier this month, as he said, by the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport. And he said that this is a good example of how the UK is responding to these problems. He said it contains new thinking about where the statutory duty of care for safety of users should be. It places specific requirements on firms to make sure their content complies with the law relating to counter-terrorism and child abuse, and to give the regulators the regulations teeth. It raises the potential for enforcement action ranging from warning notices to fines. So let's just remind ourselves, of course, this, as we said at the time, was about a complete shutdown of free speech, and it was about online disinformation, online manipulation, online abuse of public figures was the main concerns. Now, this was released, I think, about two weeks ago or so. That began a 3-month consultation process. This is a public consultation. People still have the opportunity to put their thoughts in on the issue of the online harms white paper, and I urge people to do that. So if you have a look through some of our past UK column news programmes at when we've reported on this and get involved in that consultation, it's extremely important. But of course that isn't all that Jeremy Fleming was talking about, because this issue raised its ugly head over the last couple of days, and that is the issue of the Huawei leak. So was there a leak or was there not a leak? It's very hard to say, but certainly the newspapers claimed that information had been leaked to them from the National Security Council, saying that Theresa May had agreed to permit Huawei to help build Britain's future 5G infrastructure. Our old friend Mark Sedwill had something to say about this. Now, of course, Mark Sedwill, he is basically the king, really, of the country, because he is head of the National Security Council, he's head of the Cabinet Office, he's head of the Civil Service, and he had this to say: I'm writing to you, that's all the members of the Cabinet that were at the National Security Council meeting. I'm writing to you requiring that you inform me by 2 p.m. Thursday, that's yesterday, whether or not you were involved in the leak and whether or not you would be willing to cooperate with any future inquiry into the matter. Now, this is a paraphrase of what was in the letter. As far as I know, the letter hasn't been specifically published anywhere. Quick as a flash, the various people that may perhaps in the not too distant future be wanting to be leaders of the Conservative Party started issuing denials. So here's Jeremy Hunt, first of all, saying, I, as I think everyone here knows, have never leaked confidential cabinet discussions, and I never will, so I don't want to comment further, but I do think it's a very, very bad day for our democratic processes. Gavin Williamson, our Secretary of State for War, what did he have to say? Neither I nor any member of my team have divulged information from the National Security Council. So there was this, there were other denials from other members of the Security Council and so on. What did Jeremy Fleming have to say about this issue? He said this: now, I don't need to rehearse the importance of 5G to this audience. We know it's going to be one of the most important and, in fact, impactful technologies of this or any other era. And he said, now GCHQ and the National Cybersecurity Centre's role has been to offer expert, objective, technologically literate input to the security considerations around 5G. And he said, when we analyse a company for their suitability, we're looking at the risks that arise from their security and engineering processes. The flag of origin of 5G equipment is important, but it's a secondary factor. Now, there are a whole range of issues here, but of course, it's difficult to separate this particular issue from the attack that's been going on Huawei in the United States. And the question in my mind is this about singling China out for special treatment? Because, of course, we are giving access to our national infrastructure to many other companies. I mean, for example, here is Mobileye, which, of course, is an Israeli company, and they are going to be working with the National... Sorry, who's the mapping? Ordnance Survey, yes, to build extremely detailed maps of Britain's national infrastructure, key infrastructure, to help, and that data is then going to be sold to private companies. So we have huge, if the status of national infrastructure is a national security issue, and I'm not suggesting that it isn't, we've got much bigger issues than just the issue of Huawei. Now, so is this about Huawei being a security risk, or is this really about the fact that it's a risk, that China is a risk to the Western rules-based international order because of what they're doing with the Belt and Road Initiative? I suspect it's more likely to be the latter.
Yeah, we've got a very complex picture coming to the surface, Mike. We're going to be having a look at more of this weird interaction between security services and big corporations in the Munich Security Conference. But I'll just go back to the good old Cold War days. I use that as a very loose expression, where we knew which side was which, or we thought we did. Now all of a sudden, one minute we're being told that we should be very fearful that those nasty Chinese are taking over the whole of the South China Seas, and presumably they're going to invade Australia. And the next minute we're welcoming them in, that they're going to be helping to run our nuclear power stations and 5G. So we're seeing a complete breakdown in the rules as to how we defend our own country. And if you look at how the breakdown is occurring, the country is just being ripped apart by commercial interests. But as I say, a little bit later, we'll have a look at how those commercial interests are sitting alongside defence and security interests in pally little meetings.
David, welcome to the programme. Maybe wonder if you've got any thoughts on GCHQ and Jeremy Fleming and this whole issue of Huawei and so on.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. Yeah, but I mean, both of you are you've summed it up very well there. That we're seeing this really the opening forays here of some kind of perverse scene unfolding, because it's so incoherent. It's openly incoherent that they're talking about sending the Queen Elizabeth and whatever, over into the South China Sea, as because those nasty Chinese are doing something or other. And yet, on the one hand, then on the other, you've then got them involved with nuclear reactors here in the UK and critical communications. It just isn't coherent. So, what the questions are, right, really, what really is going on behind the scenes that we're not seeing? Because, frankly, the current status is that of a dog and pony show.
You use that expression, the dog and pony show, David, which is very effective. We have street theatre for the public of this country. We are being shown street theatre, which goes to the highest level to keep our minds confused, occupied, diverted, while under the surface something very, very nasty is being built. And I think in this news, which we did say was probably going to be one of the most important we've ever put out, we're going to be able to give our audience a glimpse into what is actually being built.
Well, now let's head back over to the United States. And the good news is that Joe Biden has decided that he is going to run for president. And I was quite amused by the BBC's coverage of this yesterday, because they gave, on the PM programme yesterday evening, they gave probably about 10 minutes to this issue and maybe about 10 seconds to the allegations against Joe Biden about inappropriate touching of females of whatever age they happen to be. Donald Trump had this to say: "Welcome to the race, Sleepy Joe. I only hope you have the intelligence, long in doubt, to wage a successful primary campaign. It will be nasty. You will be dealing with people who truly have some very sick and demented ideas. But if you make it, I'll see you at the starting gate." And I was quite amused by that, because, of course, Sleepy Joe rhyming with Creepy Joe, I'm sure he didn't want to go quite that far just yet. Maybe later that terminology will change. Yes.
It's extraordinary to watch this stuff unfold, Mike.
Yeah. Right, okay. A quick reminder, if you like what we're doing and you'd like to support us, please consider joining us at the UK Column Community website. That's at ukcolumn.org/community. A quick reminder that Saving Serious Children did the BBC Lie. This is Robert Stewart's documentary that he's raising funds for at the moment. This is available at Indiegogo if you'd like to support that. We do encourage everybody to support that,
because this is exactly the sort of thing where people can make a difference. And we'll also give a reminder that Monday's the funeral for Robert Greene, and that's at All Saints Church, Daresbury Village, Cheshire. There's refreshments afterwards at the Ring of Bells pub at 3 o'clock. But if you'd like to go up to help remember Robert Greene and the tremendous work that he did, I know that the family will be pleased to see people there. I think the weather report is quite reasonable as well.
David, over the last number of months, we have been attempting to encourage people to get involved in a campaign to deal with this issue of EU military, EU Defence Union. And one of the key platforms that we've been encouraging people to get involved with is Twitter. And this campaign seems to be bearing fruit now. Just give us some idea of the sort of reaction that's coming from politicians and others.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we are getting a reaction, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. So, what can I tell you? That there are. It's been suggested to me that meetings are taking place on and around the ERG group, which is like a licensed inner party Tory pressure group or pressure vessel. They don't like being cited that they're saying they want to leave properly and all the rest of it, and are being accused, or us accusing them, or the general public accusing them on Twitter of being silent on defence union. So we're getting quite a lot of feedback from that from within the Tory party inner workings. So this is very encouraging, obviously. So we need to push on and do more. So they don't. They're very unhappy about being cited as being silent or any kind of constraint put upon them as to why they are silent. But the fact of the matter is they are silent, and whether it's the ordinary backbench Tories or front bench Tories or the ERG or whatever, they don't like this as being cited as being in effectively some kind of pact to keep quiet. So I suggest that that's something that we carry on with until they do start to talk.
Right. So one of the things that has really encouraged a reaction in the last couple of weeks is the suggestion that there's some kind of equivalent to a D notice in place, which is preventing parliamentarians and also the media from talking about this. Now, we've had some response from the BBC denying that there's any such D notice in place. But the fact of the matter is that they are not talking about it. The Europeans are talking about it, but the British press and British politicians continue to not talk about it. Now, one of the things that we pointed out on Twitter yesterday is that, of course, there is a blanket, a blanket D notice in place with respect to military matters in order to prevent the accidental revealing of information which may be effective to an enemy, for example. And this includes future defence plans. And so the question that we're asking is, does this blanket D notice cover EU defence union in this country? Because this would fall under the, yes, and it would explain it, but it falls under the idea of future defence plans. So the question is, why do you think, I mean, do you agree with that? Is this why you think there's complete silence amongst politicians and in fact they won't even use the proper terminology and the proper language?
That's entirely correct. They're absolutely, totally resistant in using the correct term of reference, which is military unification to defence union. And secondly, it is factual. They are all quiet. Even the ones that profess to leave and want to take back control are thereby hypocritical, because we are not taking back control of our military and defence industry. And in fact, what's happening is that the military and defence industry, the control is being given to the EU or handed over to the EU. So I think David Scott summed this up rather well on this. It's like, the questions are critical. How do you get, or by what means do you get 650 MPs who normally just want to, talk the hind legs off everybody about whatever they choose to do, to keep completely quiet on something that's so crucial and a principal and primary matter of state of the governance of our own military under Parliament? And yet they are all quiet, and no matter what you do to them, they don't seem to want to respond. Only that we've had the odd like or retweet from the odd MP on what has been put to them en masse. That none of them are making open press comments, apart from we've had one press statement from Liz Phillips from UKIP, who has said that she doesn't want Her Majesty's Armed Services being consumed or subsumed into the EU Defence Force. But of course, what we're really dealing with is EU Defence Union. So she was nearly there, so all credit to her. But it's crucial that we all use the correct terminology and just keep putting it to your MP until they cave in. We can't give up. It's not a question of stopping, it's a question of doing more.
Right, and so we've been putting out short video clips like the one that's on screen at the moment, and for example, this one is a short 1-minute clip or so, and the point here is that we are taking the text from British government documents. Some of them, in this case, it was a top secret document, but other documents that we've highlighted have been secret, have been released under freedom of, well, at least released to the National Archives at some point, and we're simply quoting this document and making the point that the idea of EU defence union is something that the British have been quite supportive of since the end of the Second World War. And of course, this is Ernie Bevan on screen at the moment. But we also have pushed out little video clips showing that Tony Blair admitted that he began the modern process of EU defence union with Jacques Chirac. And then this is another one that we've pushed out, which is really just making the point that Federica Mogherini, as the High Representative of the EU, is going to end up in command of all EU defence and security. There may be some difference of opinion here. We're suggesting that Mark Sedwill might have a different view, but this is the EU's diagram of the European Defence Union structures. And what they say in the document that this came from is that EU Defence Union can't stand unless each of these pillars is in place. And on the right-hand side, we've got NATO. So NATO is a key part of this. And so for anybody that has commented on this from the UK government or from other politicians that say, no, our focus is on NATO, well, that may well be the case, but NATO is a key pillar of EU Defence Union. So anything they've said does not preclude us being involved in this. And on the left-hand pillar is the other key one, because the other key pillar, which is in a slightly different colour to the rest, is bilateral defence cooperation, bilateral agreements. And of course, Britain is at the hub of a whole raft of bilateral agreements with France, with Germany, with the Netherlands, with Italy, Spain, and other countries. And so to suggest that we are out of this is a nonsense.
Correct. It's complete nonsense to say that nobody could realistically, as an elected member, say that, because that's what could be one of the reasons as to why they're all quiet on it. They're not able to deny it because it's true, and the lack of commentary on it, the silence is frankly deafening. But that diagram is a terrific diagram for everybody to sort of see the makeup of this. So we start with the overall mantle of it. It's the European Defence Union, and then down from that we see all of the structures and the acronymic components that make up the EU MOD, all of which we are in, apart from PESCO at the moment, which we're a third-party member. However, Theresa May or Mark Sedwell's agreement with the EU, future agreement, takes us into PESCO. So we'll be fully into defence union with no parliamentary debate, no scrutiny, no vote, no mandate. It's never gone to the ballot box here in Britain at all, ever in 70 years, despite it being clearly an objective since 1948 of whatever constitutes the British government. And yet we're at the point now of it actually topping out, and Ursula von der Leyen, German defence minister, are boasting that they're going to top it out next year, and yet not a peep from any of our elected members. And Tony Blair's clearly talking about this, So there's a huge amount of disparity here. So we've all got to sort of bear one thing in mind, that Federica Mogherini is effectively the single point control and command, because she has competence over every single pillar of defence union. So you'll effectively have all our armed service personnel having to jump to at her say so quite soon, unless this is resolved.
Yeah. And can I just add in there that the diagram that we've shown on screen, of course, is not a UK column diagram. This is a genuine diagram.
No, that is from an EU document, and it's being widely shared now. But this is their idea of the structure.
And that structure is not something for the future. The basics of that structure are there, and it's clearly labelling it Defence Union.
Right.
Well, good news. Let's have a look at this one, because yesterday there was quite a lot of activity over Twitter following this excellent tweet by Veterans for Britain. It said, with a picture of Theresa May, know these 2 pages and you'll know how May is giving away defence policy powers to the EU on the way out. And this is really good stuff, because again we're using European documentation itself to show what is being done out of sight of the public by this extremely devious Prime Minister and her equally devious Conservative Party. We decided to comment on this, but we said, well, actually it's not giving away, it should be given away, because Theresa May and the Conservatives have already agreed EU Defence Union and signed off on the gagging orders on her own backbench MPs. Even Johnny Mercer, MP, admits EU and even China are now driving UK defence policy into the EU Defence Union. And that was copied to some of the veterans who are clearly putting a lot of information out. And we attached an image of Johnny Mercer's letter. I'll just bring it up here on screen. I'm going to look at it in more detail, but just so that you know exactly what the tweet was. And the text that went with it is this: Johnny Mercer MP acknowledges George Soros, David Miliband, Federica Mogherini, EU High Commissioner, and some 600 others, including Fu Ying, Chinese Deputy Chairwoman of Committee on Foreign Affairs, People Republic of China, Deutsche Bank, Alliance SE, and others, are now driving UK defence policy into EU Defence Union via the Munich Security Council. Now, I've used the word council there. I could have used conference, and I'll explain that small difference in a minute. But let's have a look at what this is about. Now, this is a letter which Johnny Mercer sent out to one of his constituents, and I'm going to say this is the power of people talking to their MPs and questioning them, because this is what he had to say. Dear Mr. X, thank you for contacting me regarding our military and our recent agreement with Germany for greater military cooperation during the Munich Security Council 2019. You voiced important concerns that many have regarding foreign influence in our military strategy and in our ability to act independently. I can assure you that the agreement we reached with Germany was an independent arrangement endorsed by senior officials of our military, such as you rightly pointed out in your correspondence, Air Chief Marshal Stephen Hiller. Although you hold concerns that the proposals were influenced by individuals, namely George Soros and David Miliband, these persons are simply advisors to the committee who organised the content and direction of proceedings, where over 600 military stakeholders convene. Furthermore, also on the advisory board are representatives from Airbus, who are responsible for many components of our military procurement, and former US Secretary of State John Kerry. I include these details to demonstrate that the advisors responsible for the MSC's focus will come from a broad sphere of opinion and perspective, with each individual responsible for different sectors of the industry. Furthermore, I do not believe this agreement was an orchestrated setup or plot to undermine our military. It's also important to state that our armed forces have the capability to defend both the United Kingdom and our protectorates without foreign assistance. However, international cooperation is key to combating cyber warfare, as the transference of data and resources will protect our public services more effectively. Similarly, military cooperation is vital in ensuring that we can protect our interests as well as our allies' interests in areas such as the Middle East, the South China Sea, and even in Central Europe, where we maintain a military presence in Germany to honour our long-standing commitments. Thank you for writing to me, and feel free to contact me again if you have any future concerns. Yours sincerely, Johnny Mercer. Well, this is a truly extraordinary letter where Mr. Mercer is casually acknowledging that we've got individuals like George Soros sitting with a group that is effectively helping to form UK defence policy. So let's get into this mysterious organisation. It calls itself actually the Munich Security Conference, but of course we're interested in the council, the people who are the meat of this organisation. This is the website, and it doesn't take you very long on that front page to find that here is a very a weak-looking Prime Minister. She looks like a nervous little girl speaking to the MSC in 2018. Well, who's actually involved in this organisation? Let's just take a look here. We've got the chairman, Ambassador Wolfgang Ischinger, who's been chairman since 2008, senior professor for security policy and diplomatic practice at the Hertie School of Governance, Berlin. And if you follow his career through, he's UN, he's involved with NATO, and down at the bottom it's talking about his involvement with OSCE, mandated the panel of eminent persons on European security as a common project. Now remember that OSCE produced a document one stage which was in the colour pink or red, and it simply said common purpose on it. So who is this man? Well, we don't really know, but let's look at some of his colleagues. So we've got some pictures here, and you'll notice at the back the little grinning schoolboy, which is Mr. Miliband. And of course,
David Miliband.
David Miliband. And we've also had acknowledgement from Johnny Mercer that George Soros was involved. And of course he was, because here he is as part of the council, sitting alongside two former NATO secretary. So we've got a former NATO secretary. We've also got I think he's an ex-admiral, an admiral retired down at the bottom. So we've got a mixture of immense wealth, power, hedge funds, ability to change societies, sitting alongside NATO advisors. Something deeply unpleasant about this. But let's look at a few more of them, because it gets more interesting here. We've got Wolfgang at the top. And he is from a German engineering company, Linde AG. We've got the chairman of Deutsche Bank immediately under him. And of course, Deutsche Bank, an immense power within the European structure. But these are the people who Johnny Mercer is casually acknowledging are sitting down to help us form our defence policy. We've got some members from Saudi, of course, that's not surprising. And we've got Alliance DE, so we're into more big financial companies. It goes on here. We've got Carl Bildt, former Prime Minister of Sweden. Where do we go on? Well, what caught my eye down here is Fu Ying. So let's bring up Ms. Fu Ying, Deputy Chairwoman of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, National People's Congress, People's Republic of China. Since when were the Chinese helping us look after the defence of UK, Mike? Particularly when we've had Gavin Williamson saying that we should be sending Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier to China because they're so dangerous. I've got more to cover, David. I am rapidly running out of words, because what we are seeing here, and it's been acknowledged as factually correct by Johnny Mercer MP, is a group of foreign nations, bankers and industrialists, simply now taking control of UK's defence policy.
It's certainly looking that way. I mean, my question is this, and it's a primary concern. Where are the MPs and Parliament in this process? So we've got defence policy being formed completely on a supranational basis. So what are we dealing with here? We're dealing with Johnny Mercer, who's a Defence Committee member, where we're always seeing complaints about the status of things in Britain. However, what have we actually got? Well, I think I'm going to submit this, which is very linear to John Redwood. I don't agree with him on everything, but I certainly agree with him on this. We've got puppet MPs with a puppet parliament. We've got puppet military, because it's being controlled and and being decided upon what it's going to do and whom it's going to serve elsewhere, outside of any democratic mandate here in Britain, regardless of who you vote for or who you don't vote for. And yet, We're the one paying the tax. It's the British taxpayer that are paying for all this. So it's taxation without representation in effect. And if you think of the billions of pounds that have been invested into British military by the British taxpayer and all the people that have served, that this is now going to be unified into a supranational conglomerate where all the likes of these people are going to have competence over it, that you have absolutely no chance of dealing with in a democratic fashion whatsoever.
Right, David, you used the phrase there, these people. Let's just get into a bit more of who these people actually are, because a gentleman was very kind to send me a list of attendees. So just hold that one a second, Mike. I'll just read this off. But this was a list of participants at this Munich Security Council. Top of the list, Mark Sedwell. Well, that won't surprise you. George Osborne, David Miliband, Sir Alan Duncan, Europe Minister, so we know what's happening, Michel Barnier, Joe Biden, the Lebanese Defence Minister, the UK Deputy Energy Secretary, on it goes, the CEO of Airbus Helicopters, the Polish Foreign Minister, the Special Ops Director of Mossad. Well, I'm very encouraged to know that Mossad is helping us form our defence policy. But he was sitting alongside the President of Raytheon, sitting next to, I'm using that as a loose expression, the global PR head of Alliance Insurers, Lord Walter Campbell of Pittenweem. We had the Dutch foreign minister, we had the Moroccan foreign minister, we had lots of German industrialists and NATO men, we had the Russian chief rabbi. Well, my goodness, could he be working directly for Putin? I think somebody should alert our intelligence services that the chief rabbi from Russia was sitting next to people involved in UK defence. We had the president of the German Marshall Fund from within the US, and of course that's the organisation that's helped fund the European Union itself. We had the Estonian, Georgian, Slovene and Lithuanian defence ministers, and of course we had the chief executive of the European Defence Agency sitting alongside BBC chief international correspondent Lise Doucet, if I pronounced that correct, Doucet, the Quebec lady who I think misreported on Syria, but more on that. Now, you need bankers because they're the men who hold the power, and good to see that there was also an advisory director of Goldman Sachs present. We also had Admiral Sir Clive Johnson, commander of Allied Maritime Command, NATO. We had Sir Lawrence Freedman, Emeritus Professor of War Studies, King's College London, and so it went on. I better just mention Jens Stoltenberg because that's another special name for you. We had the former Danish PM who's wife of Stephen Kinnock and who took a selfie with Obama and Cameron at the funeral of, I forgot the gentleman's name, Mandela. So an extraordinary mix of people, bankers, industrialists, global hedge fund operatives sitting alongside helping UK form defence policy. If I was making this up, it would be very bad humour, but we're not. This is the list of attendees, and we have Johnny Mercer MP casually admitting that these are the people now controlling defence. So let's take a step back at a warning from Gavin Williamson. Gavin Williamson got very, very excited and said that China was such a threat, we were going to have to send our new aircraft carrier with very few aircraft to the South China Sea in order to keep the Chinese in check. What did Theresa May do? Within a couple of days, she absolutely distanced herself from that comment. But now we've got Theresa May, of course, handing China a 5G contract. So she stabs the Minister for War in the back. He obviously didn't make up a statement that he was going to, there was a deployment of the aircraft carrier. Gavin Williamson wouldn't have made that up. So this must have been policy. He announces it, she distances herself from him. And what is she then doing? Giving contracts to the Chinese. And of course, it's not just 5G, because this little report was sent through to us. This is back from January. China to help plug UK nuclear power gap as Japanese plans falter. So this is UK's strategic infrastructure, and in come the Chinese. So let's have a little look at Johnny Mercer, because all of a sudden this man is under attack. And I chose just some of the reports that you can get on the internet, but there's 3, all now accusing Johnny Mercer of taking money from a firm which collapsed, leaving people in debt. On it goes. This is an orchestrated campaign to undermine Johnny Mercer. And in my opinion, David, I can only think that this is being done because Johnny Mercer, as a member of the Defence Committee, knows too much about how UK's military are being subsumed into the EU, and he's now giving this information away. The BBC, of course, jumping on the bandwagon. MP Johnny Mercer's salary funded by failed bond scheme marketing agent. They had to have a big picture of him here. I think this is Johnny Mercer being stitched up because as a former military vet, or as a military veteran whose name is being put forward as a possible prime minister, they regard him as immensely dangerous. He could unite the nation. So Johnny Mercer is being destroyed publicly by the Conservative Party. Is that too far of the mark?
I mean, you're submitting a perfectly reasonable hypothesis there, and I'm gonna say this: as far as we're concerned, there's one clear factor that's common, and the common factor for Johnny Mercer, and the common factor now, as we speak in Britain, is military. So, as someone that's ex-military, and all of the issues currently with the service personnel being pursued legally, and the movement now there with among the veterans, is there's the common military link. Conjoined with that in the same political scene as one EU defence union, and you have a huge issue. It is the biggest issue that we've faced since 1939. Now, if, and this is the if there is some consensus to be found in the nation, I fundamentally believe it will be that from top to bottom in our society, or from one end of our society, so from one end of our society to the other, that everybody does love and support our military because of their service. Now, whether that be former military or currently serving, it's all the same. Now, I don't fundamentally believe that the British people will support Her Majesty's Armed Services being unified into EU Defence Union if they knew about it all en masse. Now, I'm reliably informed by a first-hand source who has reported to me that Gavin Williamson took a meeting with a special advisor and Defence Union was spoken about. And the response was that Gavin Williamson did not want to engage in signing the EU Defence Union Pact. Now we're seeing something happen to him as well. So I'm going to submit to everyone that this is the common link. It is military. And if we can all take something on board and away from this in order to propagate, it is that. That is the common link. Now, it's very simple. Johnny Mercer just needs to sing. It's a bit like Morecambe and Wise. At the moment, he's not playing all the right notes in the right order. If he plays the right notes in the right order, he's going to make a song, and it's going to be very, very potent. And he may well do some good. So this is really the pivotal point. So the ball's realistically in his court as to whether he now starts to talk about defence union and really what's going on in the country with that and the brand's destruction of Her Majesty's Armed Services by legal pursuit of the veterans.
Thank you for that, David.
Okay, well, we're more or less out of time, but I wanted to just bring this one in because we mentioned a week or so ago this tweet from Renegade Inc., or retweeted by Renegade Inc. Famine is crushing children in Yemen, and the whole world stands still to the suffocating siege imposed on the country. And well, it continues to happen because, well, Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Secretary, is holding a meeting today on Yemen. And he's going to host that meeting with representatives from the United States, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. And they're going to discuss the next steps in the UN-led peace process and how best to support the efforts of UN Special Envoy Martin Griffiths. But it was the quote there. I called this meeting so that we keep doing everything we can to move forward on the hard road to peace in Yemen. And I just, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but that did not leave me feeling terribly reassured that he was actually attempting to prevent any more harm to the people of that country. What he means by the hard road to peace is the continuing bombing of that country and the continuing starvation of people in that country and the continuing restriction of medical supplies in order to achieve the regime change that they are aiming for. And I think that's a pretty reprehensible statement by the British Foreign Secretary. And, you know, this is the forgotten war. This is not being discussed enough amongst the media and so on, and it needs to be.
Brought to the fore.
Yes.
Well, of course, Jeremy Hunt is a prime example of one of the ministers of the government of occupation. These people don't have proper British values, and I use that in the nicest way, that he doesn't have compassion. He's not showing sympathy, empathy for the people who are being murdered, killed, maimed. He's just interested in the political gain and the profit. Government of occupation is the right word. At the moment you use it, right expression, you start to say, well, who is Jeremy Hunt? What is his values? Who does he actually work for? But you've given that side from UK. This one was pointed out to me, took Russia Today to talk about it. Macron is pursuing journalists who expose French complicity in possible Saudi war crimes in Yemen. And this is to do with the French arms trade. And remember, of course, that alongside UK, France is one of the big arms exporters. 3 journalists have been summoned for questioning by French police for their role in explosive report detailing how the Macron government knowingly sold arms to Saudi Arabia and the UAE for use in Yemen. These reporters are now having to report to the internal security teams. They're due to be questioned by the General Directorate for Internal Security, France's domestic intelligence agency, in a hearing scheduled for mid-May. The move has been condemned in a statement signed by 36 French press outlets, including Le Monde and AFP. Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed in the Saudi-led intervention in Yemen, which has been waged since 2014. Up to 14 million people are at risk of starvation as a result of the ensuing Saudi-led blockade. So it's taken Russia Today to point that out, but absolutely reinforcing your report there, Mike, that it is despicable what the UK and indeed France have been allowing to happen in the Yemen. We'll leave it there. David, thank you very much for joining us. We'll say to people watching, one letter from Johnny Mercer has revealed much about how the UK is being taken apart as a nation state. Please do contact your MPs. If they don't reply, stay on the case, keep challenging them, turn up on their doorstep and demand answers, because the cracks are coming. There are MPs who are starting to understand we have a government of occupation and we are going to need the support of everybody we can to overturn this.
Now, we're playing out with a piece of video that was being sent to us by a viewer in Israel. Really, Brian, it's a mad world. It's a mad world. I'll just say, people now contacting us from Israel, also today from New Zealand, a few days ago from South Africa. If you're watching UK column from overseas, we're delighted to have you on board. Please help us expose some of the, what can I say, the criminal acts of the UK government worldwide.